Hello and welcome to Pictorial Planet. My name's John Finch. Over the last few weeks we've been looking at printing this negative, and I've got it looking pretty nice. So this week I want to finish it off, and to finish it off I'm going to use a little bit of toning. Now we've seen toning before on my YouTube channel. I did some quick sepia toning and demonstrated how to do that. And I initially tried to sepia tone a test strip of this, but I wasn't happy. The colours were just too yellow for me. So this week we're going to split tone this particular photograph. We're going to use sepia and selenium. We'll talk a little bit more about those two toners in a moment, but I just wanted to show you that a lot of the information I get for toning is from this book by Tim Rudman. It's a very good book indeed, and I recommend it wholeheartedly. The Masters Printing course by Tim Rudman. So let's get to the darkroom, let's get going and see what we can do with split toning this negative. This is our original print, and I want to show you what it would look like if I sepia toned it. So here is a sepia toned test strip. Remember, I told you some time ago when we talked about toning, always keep your test strips, because if you're going to later tone that print, they're really useful for checking out what it's going to look like. So there's sepia. We can see it's quite yellow. It's almost a touch of green to it. Now, selenium toning, on the other hand, is inky. There is an inky selenium tone test strip. It's almost purple. There's a slight purple to it, but it's dark and inky. And selenium is used to increase Dmax, to increase contrast, because selenium really affects the shadows a lot, the dark parts of your photograph, and sepia affects the light tones of the photograph more than the dark tones. Look at the two next to each other. Now, if we could combine these two toners, we would get something that looked like this. And that is sepia toned highlights and selenium toned shadows. Now, it's not as boldly selenium toned as this one here, the top one. But it's very nice. I like that a lot. It's more in keeping with what I'm imagining this print should look like. So let's go ahead and see how we can split tone our photograph. These are the two toners we're going to be using today. I'm going to be using Thioria to make the sepia toner. We've seen how to do that in a previous video of mine. And we're going to be using this Kodak Rapid Selenium toner. Now, word of warning about both of these products. First of all, the selenium. It is poisonous, so you do not want to get this on your hands. You don't want to breathe in the dust. You definitely don't want to get it in your eyes. So take appropriate safety measures when using this. Always use it in a very well ventilated space. I'll be using it in the darkroom, but with the door to the outside wide open next to me. Thioria, on the other hand, the dust of this chemical can spoil prints. That's paper before it's been used for printing and paper after it's been used for printing. So it is risky to use in the darkroom. So what I do with Thioria is I mix it outside. Once it's in liquid form, it's a lot safer to bring back into the darkroom. So make up your Thioria redeveloper, your sepia redeveloper, outside and then bring it in. Now, there's some more safety precautions we need to talk about. Always wear gloves. You must wear gloves when you're using toners, especially selenium. Selenium does not want to get on your skin. So another thing to be aware of is don't use metal when you're toning. So make sure you use all plastic trays and plastic print tongs, very important. There must be no fixer in the print, so make sure it's been fully washed. You can tone immediately after creating the print, no problem, but it has to be fully washed before you tone it. So with fiber-based, which is what I'm going to be using, I'm going to wash my prints for at least an hour. before I tone them. Use gloves. You do not want to get these toners on your hands, especially selenium. It's poisonous. Make sure you've got plenty of ventilation. You don't want to be breathing in the vapors from some of these toners, so ventilate very well. And use fully developed prints. We don't want to be using prints that you've pulled from development. Something that I do not recommend anyway. You should not be pulling prints in development. You should be printing to completion, a full 2 minutes in your developer, or using the factorial method. So don't use prints that have been pulled, and don't use prints that are being cooked, because cooked prints often have a hidden fog, and that hidden fog will get toned as well, so you'll get this toned overall fogginess to your print. So don't cook your prints either. Just use proper prints that you've printed correctly, fully, for the full 2 minutes in Print Developer. I think that's about it. So now I'm going to make my toners up and show you how to do that. Now the first thing we're going to make is our sepia toner. Now with sepia toning, you need to first bleach the print and then redevelop it in the sepia redeveloper. Now the bleach that we use for sepia toning is a ferrocyanide bleach, and it's made with potassium ferrocyanide and potassium bromide. Now, there's different concentrations you can make of this bleach, and because we have to be very careful not to over bleach our print when we're split toning, I'm going to make half strength bleach today. Now, to make bleach, I would normally use 1 liter of water at 20 degrees centigrade and add 1.5 teaspoons of potassium bromide and 1.5 teaspoons of potassium ferrocyanide. I'm going to half that strength, so I'm going to use 3/4 of a teaspoon of each. So let's get that together. I've got some water here that I've previously measured around 20 degrees, and the temperature hasn't to be precise with bleaching and with toning, but it's nice to standardize, because then you will get consistent results, and consistent results is something we're always striving for in the darkroom. So there I have water. I put about 800 mils of water into this jug here. I'm going to make sure I've got a piece of paper here to dry something in a moment, and I'm going to put in 3/4 of a teaspoon of ferrocyanide. I've got the door open so that we're safe from any fumes from these chemicals or dust, and I'm going to put 3/4 of a teaspoon of ferrocyanide in there. I'm going to give this a rinse, make sure there's none of that left on there, and dry it with this paper towel, and then use the same amount, 3/4 of a teaspoon of potassium bromide. Just 3/4. Doesn't have to be exact. There we are. Good estimate. All right. So let's mix that all together. Make sure it's all dissolved. And this is half strength. That will give us much more control over our bleaching process, and controls what we need, because sometimes these prints, they can bleach very quickly indeed, and suddenly it's done, and that's more than what we want. We only really want to half bleach this print. So there we are, and I'm going to just top it up to 1 liter. There, lovely. Now then, I'll put that, just wash this here. Contamination is something you always want to guard against. And I'll just pour that into this plastic tray. Lovely. Now that bleach does go off quickly, but we'll be using it quickly, so I'm not worried about it. It will certainly last half an hour. Okay, I'm making sure I clean this jug out thoroughly. and then we'll talk about making the sepia redeveloper. Yeah. Good rule of thumb, 3 complete fills and empties pretty much completely gets rid of any previous chemistry that was in a jug. All right, let's put these over here out of the way for now, and we'll talk about the thiourea. Now, remember I talked about thiourea and the danger of the powder getting on your prints or negatives, whether they're processed or unprocessed, and how the dust can mark them badly and ruin them. So don't mess with this stuff inside the darkroom. Always take it outside to mix it. I have already done that previously, and I have here the thiourea pre-mixed. Now, to make this solution, I used 100 milliliters of water, and I added 1.5 teaspoons of thiourea. The water was warm, has to be warm to dissolve the thiourea, not hot, just hand warm, and then it dissolved quite readily. That's a 5% solution. And here is sodium hydroxide, a 10% solution, and to make that I also added 1.5 teaspoons of sodium hydroxide to 100 milliliters of water, and that makes a 10% solution. You don't have to be exact with these toners. It's an art form, is toning, and exactness just doesn't need to come into it. But if you need to be exact, 10 grams made up to 100 ml of water will be a 10% solution, and in this case 5 grams made up to 100 milliliters with water makes a 5% solution. So there are my redeveloper parts. To use this, I add 28 milliliters of each solution into 1 liter of water, and that creates the redeveloper. So I can reuse this many times. Now here I have a measurer, a special measurer just for this purpose, and I'm going to use this to make our measurements. So first of all, let me add some of my pre-warmed water at 20 degrees. There we are. And we'll first of all put in the thiourea. Now I've got a video on making this earlier in my series, so please take a look at that. 28 ml. Yeah. Just give this a quick rinse. There we are. And then sodium hydroxide solution. Let's make 28 milliliters of that. There we go. Lovely. I can already start to smell a very slight sulfurous pong coming from it. It's not very strong, but it's definitely present. There. Push that out and give this a stir. So now that is my sepia redeveloper. I'm going to make it up to 1 liter. There. And I'm going to pour that into another tray. Now there's a reason why I'm going to be developing the print first of all in sepia, and the reason for that is because the selenium will actually, if I put it in the selenium first, it will make the print archival. Now we don't want that print to become archival, because if we turned it archival with our selenium, we wouldn't be able to tone it with another toner. So what we need to do is use the sepia first, which will just tone the highlights and leave the rest of the silver untouched. It affects the highlights first. So I will show you in a moment how we bleach the highlights out, quickly stop the bleaching, put it into the sepia redeveloper, which redevelops only the highlight tones, leaving the silver in the dark areas untouched. Then we will selenium tone, and the selenium will affect the dark areas, the untouched silver, but won't affect the sepia silver because that has become archival. So you see what's happening here. We effectively tone the highlights, they become archival, but the shadows are not affected, and then we tone the shadows, they become archival, but it can't affect the highlights. And that's the secret of this type of split toning. So let's get to it. The first thing I need to do is show you bleaching this particular photograph. The first thing I'm doing is soaking the print in water. So I'm making sure it's absolutely soaked right through. Now, this print was one I did a couple of weeks ago, so of course it's dry. If I was toning immediately after creating the photograph, it would already be wet, wouldn't it? Because I would have been washing it for an hour after fixing. So I'm trying to kind of get back to that stage of the completely wet washed print. And this is looking pretty good. It's been in the water now for a couple of minutes. Now this can happen very quickly. So I'm going to set the clock and watch the time, because it's important to me that I can reproduce this. So I know I've got half strength bleach here, so I'm going to be able to reproduce this if I need to do it again. All right, so this is nicely soaked in. So I'm now going to pop this into my bleach. Now this can happen very quickly, so I've got to watch it carefully and zero my clock. Hopefully with the half strength it's going to be much more under my control. But I'm going to gently, just very gently agitate it in this. I'm starting to see if it an effect, I think. Not a lot yet though. Now I want to take this out before it's ready and get it into this wash water to stop it bleaching anymore. So this is beginning to go now. That's 45 seconds. Yep, I'm happy with that. I'm going to put it back into this wash water and I'm going to make sure I stop it. I need to give it a complete and thorough wash. To get rid of all of that bleach. Just keep emptying this tray. Now if you don't do this, if you don't thoroughly wash this the way I'm doing it here with running water, it will continue to bleach and you'll end up with something over bleached, something that's gone too far, which might look like a lovely sepia print in the end, but won't take much selenium. So we're trying to balance between the sepia bleach and redevelopment and the selenium that we're going to use later. All right, I'm going to wash that now for a further 5 minutes to make sure that that's completely, that the bleach is completely gone, and then I'll get back to you. Here's our semi-bleached print, and I think you'd be able to see under the camera that the highlights have bleached quite a lot, especially these areas here. If I can just get rid of that reflection, these areas and around the apple, these highlights here, here, these have bleached nicely, and yet the shadows have maintained pretty much the same darkness as they had before. I have here my redeveloper made with my thiourea and sodium hydroxide. So now I'm going to pop this in there and we're going to redevelop those bleached areas. So with this, there's no particular time. I'm just going to give it a gentle couple of minutes in this. You can already see it's going a nice sepia color. But not too much, not completely in your face sepia. This is the effect I'm after. It might be surprising when you try this yourselves in your own darkrooms, just how much subtle sepia tone you get from such a short bleach. You could clearly see I hardly bleached the image at all in 45 seconds to a minute in half strength bleach, but it's definitely got a nice warm look to it now, which I'm really enjoying. The highlights have come back in, they're no longer looking burned out. The bleach kind of makes them look burned out because it takes the silver away, it bleaches the silver away, but now they've redeveloped. And that's lovely, it's already done. I really don't need to do any more redevelopment with this image. So now I need to wash this print thoroughly, so I'm going to give it 1 hour in the wash to completely wash out any of this chemistry so that I don't contaminate my selenium chemistry that will come up later. All right, so I'll come back to you in an hour's time. Now an hour has passed, so we're really ready now to selenium tone our print. Now I want to just show you this compared to an original so you can see the difference in tone color there. So there's quite a sepia tone there, but not that bright yellow. It's a more subtle shade of sepia which I'm after for this particular print. But what I want now is to increase the Dmax. I want to darken the shadows and bring in a little bit more inkiness to the shadows. And that's where the selenium is going to come in. So this is fully washed and it's ready for the next part of our toning. Now here I have the selenium toner pre-mixed. Kodak recommend 1+20 for archival toning with selenium, which does increase the Dmax very slightly. It's quite a nice, adds a little bit of punch to the print, and of course creates an archival print. But you can work with this toner right down to 1+2, 1+3. That's very strong. I'm going to be using 1+10 for today's toning for this split tone. So I've already pre-mixed that 1+10 in here and I'm going to pour it now into the tray. Now gloves are on, I've got safety glasses on. I'm going to make sure the door remains wide open, which it is behind me. There we are. I just put that in there. And that's our selenium toner. And this is going to convert the silver that's not been affected, I should say, by the sepia. It's going to convert it into silver selenide, which is a much darker archival silver. So we don't need to time this. I'm just going to give it 2 or 3 minutes. Let's pop it in and watch the effect. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the camera. I'm just gently agitating it in the selenium toner, I can see the shadows are starting to darken. Oh yes, definitely. I'm getting more contrast now. This is a thing with sepia toning. It does reduce the contrast of the print. But by just adding this little couple of minutes in selenium, it brings that contrast back again. Looks like it's working very nicely. I hope you're able to see that. Now the overall shade of the toning is changing slightly. The apple and these highlights are maintaining that sepia look, but the rest of it is becoming more of a there's a hint of red, a hint of purple in the shadows. The interesting thing with toned photographs is that when they're not compared next to non-toned photographs, sometimes people don't even notice that there's any toning at all, which is always interesting to me. It's very subtle. This is less subtle today, but you can do some really subtle toning. So that's been in now for about a minute and a quarter. Just gently agitating it. And when this is finished, this whole print will be archival, which means all the silver has been converted into either silver sulfide for the sepia or silver selenide with the selenium toner. And this will protect the print from anything attacking it that's in the air. So if you do want your prints to last a long, long time, this is definitely the thing to do. There we are. I think that's about right. I think that's looking fine. Now, look at that. I'm pleased. I am going to pop that in the wash and give it a thorough wash for around about an hour to get rid of any chemistry that is inside this fiber-based paper. And then I'll show you the results. So it's been washing for an hour. I want to show you what it's like. Look at that. I'm really pleased with that print. It's a lovely print. Here is an original that's untoned. And look at the difference now. It's really got body. It looks three-dimensional to me. It's a beautiful print. I'm very pleased with that indeed. I want a big shout out to my patrons because they're the people who bring you this channel. Please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Thank you, patrons, and I will see you all next week.